Hey, struggler, Daniel here. No, I'm kidding. I just ripped that intro from Seth on YouTube. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode on Godot Unscripted. Today, we have the one and only Ulfsire, also known as Hunter, joining us. Creator of Path of Achra and the new upcoming game Lands of Achra. He loves procedural generation, pixel art, all things medieval, poems, and dungeon crawlers. A master of lore and also a pretty chill guy. Hunter, how the hell are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic now that you're here. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Um, yeah, recently, obviously had the big influx of players in December, but just trying to stay on top of things and keep going forward.
Nice. I hope that intro was accurate. Please correct me if it's wrong at any point.
I think it's pretty accurate. The part I would say I'm sort of trying to avoid medieval stuff specifically. I'm trying to go back in time a little bit before that. That's actually a lot of like that. That might be something to talk about, but a lot of the stuff I was interested in doing for Path of Achra was sort of emphasizing more Bronze Age type stuff, stuff that's sort of more distant from medieval, like European medieval settings that are really common in a lot of fantasy games.
Okay, that's really interesting. I really want to get into that. I wanted to start with the history in general, but I had trouble stalking you on social media because it seems you don't have a lot of history that I could see ever since the persona Ulfsire was born. But perhaps we can go a little bit back in time. Could you tell me when you first got interested in games?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, in interest in making games, like for most of my life, I've liked making custom maps for Warcraft 3, which I don't know if that counts or not, but that's basically my history in game making. I sort of got into it with a bit more intensity 5 years ago. I was making some big maps and they were played by people, and I didn't try actual like game dev outside of modding like that until 2022, 21, when I downloaded Godot and started making something.
Wait, that's insane. So you only started with game development 2 years ago? Or, I mean, three at this point, I guess. It's still 2024.
Yeah, more like maybe three or four, I would say. I mean, I didn't start Path of Achra until 2022. The basic trajectory for that was, I think, like right after the pandemic in 2020. I was making Warcraft 3 maps and putting a ton of energy into them. Like they became obsessive. I would think about them all the time, and I would just like put a ton of work into those things. And I started to get frustrated because I realized like I was putting all this energy into it, and it was fantastic getting people to play the games. But I knew that if I was doing real game development and like independently releasing something I could sell, it would sort of turn into something that could actually sustain me. Because my whole life I've had to work like service jobs. I was working in a bakery at that time, like making coffee for people, just minimum wage stuff. I sort of just had I just had a moment where I realized that like I was putting all this passion into these maps, and I wasn't, and like there was a world where it was possible for that to turn into like a vocation that I could pursue. So that's what initially prompted me to download Godot.
That's crazy. Do you have an engineering background or something like that? Or were you just the modding for Warcraft 3?
Just modding. I didn't have any software background, and that's what stopped me for so long, is because I felt very intimidated by the idea of like quote unquote coding, which I don't actually have to do. But I think for my generation there was a lot of language around that makes it seem very mysterious and unattainable, when it's at this point it's really not. Like anyone can make a game if they want to. The tools are out there.
Absolutely. The tools and the tutorials, which lead me to my next question. What about pixel art and music? Did that just happen at the same time as Godot, or did this have a history as well?
Pretty much at the same time. For pixel art, I just found another free open source option, which is GIMP. And not even because I didn't even really know what open source meant, but I just, like I said, I was working minimum wage jobs. I needed free tools. So I use GIMP. It's not the best for pixel art, but I'm used to it. For music, I actually bought One Bit Dragon. It's on itch.io, just because I saw somebody recommend it. It's really cool. It actually, like, it has a very visual sort of interface, which helps me because I don't know anything about music or or music theory or notes or anything like that. So I'm very appreciative of it.
Absolutely. I'm already checking it out on another tab. I'll save it for later.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good project. It's made by a sole developer, I think, and I'd love for them to sell copies of that because it's a good product.
Oh my god, I am already so inspired by your story and the passion. You're absolutely right. Now I'm like, I have no excuse for not publishing a game.
Well, no, there's all sorts of. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. It's for me, like when I was working on the game and like working my job at the same time. Like I'd like get up at like 4 a.m. to work on it. And it wasn't like it was driven by a lot of excitement and joy, but it wasn't like a happy way to live necessarily. Like it's very stressful. So I don't blame anyone for not doing it.
Right.
And even like a game turning into something that makes money that lets you quit your job is a pretty rare thing to have happen. But in my case, like I was making so little,
Absolutely,
just in the workforce that it didn't have to make very much for me to quit my job.
I mean, I assume you already quit, and we're not talking theoretically, right? Or are you still waking up at 4 a.m. to create Lands of Achra?
For about the first year of early access, I was still working at the bakery, and the game, like at that point, the launch of the game in early access was better than I expected. It made like 10,000 or something, which was way higher than I thought. I thought I'd make like $100 total or something, because that's how most games end up. So after that, I was like, okay, this is cool. Let's see how it goes. And then like every month, it would make like 1,000 or 2,000. And then eventually, I realized like that's about how much I would make working at the bakery. Like I just decided that like I should, because I still had the full release coming up. So I felt like if I can sustain myself and it makes sense, I should just put all my energy into this and see what I can make with the full release. So I quit like, yeah, near the end of early access. I quit the bakery and just put all my energy into it.
All right, then let's head to the beginning of Path of Achra, or actually to the beginning of Godot. So you downloaded Godot. Did you immediately start developing Path of Achra? Did you have this idea clear in your mind already?
Yeah, when I downloaded Godot, I didn't immediately start making Path of Achra. I downloaded it and I watched a platformer tutorial and followed a platformer tutorial and made like a little platformer. It wasn't really a full game. It was just me trying to learn how to make something. And then I tried to make like a 4X game, and that sort of showed me how to make a grid of sprites. And that was like the most useful lesson I got out of that to make Path of Achra. But like I think the 4X game was sort of like my dream game, and I got frustrated because I didn't know enough. I didn't know how to do it well enough. I was just so excited by the possibility of like something playable that was mine. But like I think, as is the fate of most first projects, like they get abandoned into something else. And for me, like I was making that, and like I think Rift Wizard came out, which sort of showed me that people like that type of thing. I had just made a Warcraft 3 map called Ulfsire's Roguelike. That was probably my most popular map, and that sort of made me think about how I could just make a dungeon crawler roguelike type game. Now that I knew how to make a grid and move units on a grid. So that's what started Path of Achra.
I mean, you take what you need from each tutorial, right? That's the most important thing. And you're absolutely right that most first projects get abandoned, right? At least you got frustrated and moved on to the next thing. You said you were interested in 4X games. I guess your second biggest interest was then roguelikes, traditional roguelikes.
Yeah, I was interested in both. I think at the time I just really wanted to make a 4X type game. But I played a lot of like Tome, Dungeon Crawl, Stone Soup. Those games I always liked because they were free, and I'd spent time like working for AmeriCorps, where we lived like up in cabins in the woods, and we didn't have internet, and so I had those games on like this old laptop that could run these like old roguelike games. So that they always have like a special sort of place in my consciousness as something that like these really huge games that don't require a lot of computing power, that don't like, you can always play them, you can always access them. So I'm very nostalgic about that genre in general.
Tell me a little bit about the lore, because I really, really adore that. Just from looking at your post history on different social media, how you would post a particular piece of pixel art from the game, and describing what type of creature it is, how it behaves, like really in lore.
Yeah. So that part is something I'm really excited about. And initially when I made the game, it didn't really have any lore in it. It just had the creature descriptions. And that was sort of something I learned as I was developing, that people really, really responded to the writing like that. So as the game has been developed, I've just been sort of leading into it more and more. And yeah, you can see like it makes great sort of social media fodder. I think my original posts about Path of Achra were like trying to talk about builds and skill combinations. But it's sort of hard to communicate that beyond someone just playing the game. Like the lore stuff is something that, like my educational background, my creative life before game dev was all like poet. I'm a published poet. I used to teach poetry. I've done a lot of writing, and I've always loved that kind of thing. And I think just getting like a sliver of praise about that stuff in the game just sort of made me sort of rabidly pursue it and just keep adding more of that, because that's sort of what I loved before game dev is doing that stuff. So being able to sort of combine it with games and use both to enrich each other has been a really sort of emotionally good thing for me. I never wrote like fantasy though in my life before, so getting to like sort of develop an identity around this idea of dark fantasy, Bronze Age, Vanished Earth type thing has been really exciting for me.
Something that is absolutely crazy to me is like the amount of classes, subclasses, and specializations you have. How you describe them and how you manage to come up with the names, you know? I'm more of a traditional, I don't know if traditional is the right name, right? But if you ask me for classes, I go for the warrior, ranger, whatever. And what I like about Path of Achra the most is...
Yeah, I've got warrior in there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But like the amount of classes you have and the names, I'm like, I could have never come up with this.
No, I know what you mean. So, like, some of the classes, like, this ties back into what I was saying about European medieval stuff that I'm trying to like, not do. Like, some of the words, like, ranger, it sort of feels that way to me, so that's why I didn't use that. But other things, like paladin, like, that word is pretty specific. So that's some of the reason for the way the classes are named how they are. But it's really fun for me just sort of looking up other languages and other words for things and using them as names and descriptions.
Ah, okay. So all these words come from other languages. Because when I look, for example, at the classes, the Amir, the Peltast, the Atbi, the Mubarisun, right? It's like, this is incredible.
Yeah. A lot of those are very specifically, like the Mubarizan is like a duelist champion. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. And that's something that I take inspiration from, if you've ever heard of the Illwinter games, like Dominions or Conquest of Elysium. And those games are made by, like, one of them is an actual historian, but they try to use a lot of stuff from world mythology, like ancient world mythology. And I really enjoy that kind of thing.
Something that also impresses me is your confidence in creating and releasing the classes in general. I suffer from, for example, if I create, let's say, two warriors conceptually, one has a sword and one has a scimitar, I would be like, no, that's too similar, like scrap them. But the way you describe them makes them so unique, you know? How did you deal with that?
I think that's actually a key thing that started to really help me in development is sort of, you have to like fostering sort of a blind confidence. Like I do there's a lot of stuff in the game that if I looked at it critically, it would feel redundant, it would feel like a waste. And if I do that, if I look at the game that way, there's a ton of stuff in there that I really don't like. I think that what's been helpful is sort of the stance of, with games like that, I always just like it when developers just pile on classes and content and options and different variations. Like I just think any variation for a player is enjoyable, even if it's not as meaningful as it could be. And for me, like, it's the type of thing where I could spend 5 years being really, really thoughtful about all the differences and making sure everything is super distinct. I think what I wanted was just to do stuff fast and to have that be sort of part of the experience. Because I was doing early access, I think a lot of the players really responded to how fast I was putting stuff out. Like, I don't think they would have cared how much thought I put into it. I think what they cared more about was just how quickly, like, new things were appearing and how, like, sort of thematically distinct they might be, even if they weren't, like, mechanically mind-blowing or game-changing. I think, like, the rapidity of that sort of creation can be very exciting. And it was something where, like, as a solo developer, it felt like one of the ways I could distinguish myself from like a bigger team that sort of has to go through a QA process and slowly put stuff out. Like I could just make something off the top of my head and add it, and it would be like, if it was super broken or buggy, that was also something that was exciting. Like, 'cause that was something players could find, and it just feels like a more intimate way to develop, because it's just like having ideas, drawing pictures, putting them into the game, and then sort of seeing how people react to it.
That's what makes the game so unique as well, right? The first time I was playing it, just seeing, for example, that there's an Usmanzi, I'm not sure if it was class or damage type,
Right.
and it was hard to keep track of everything at the beginning, but then you like really start looking for those synergies. Was it the same with the powers, where you just came up with as many things as you could and had just had fun with it?
Yeah, at the start, with those, it was more of like a limited space. Like, because I just decided to limit myself by the size of the screen. So I think for each one, it was like there could be 11 total. So a lot of those powers like have been remade from previous forms. And this is sort of how I treated a lot of the stuff. Like, a lot of the classes have been remade a couple times. So it wasn't like the first time I did it or the first iteration was always the best. Yeah, my attitude is that like it's exciting to see just like a ton of things you can pick from. A lot of games in the modern roguelike genre sort of have a philosophy around like limiting the amount of things you can choose from. Like, the classic Vampire Survivor thing of like pick from 3 when you level up, because the idea is you don't want to overwhelm the player, you don't want to turn them off by giving them too many options. You don't want to give them analysis paralysis or whatever. But I felt like, after playing Rift Wizard, which lets you pick from everything, I sort of felt like that's an underserved desire, to have that ability to like see the whole like sea of options. You can see that in like something like Path of Exile too. So I think that I was motivated to like really be firm that like there was just a ton of stuff you could look at and pick from. And that was part of the excitement.
Right. That's really cool. We've talked that you mentioned you had a writing background, a poetry background. And in Path of Achra, you have cultures, religions. Are you also a bit of a historian? You mentioned that you like the Bronze Age, right? It feels that you are also a big fan of world building as a whole.
Yeah, a lot of the poetry I'm into is like translated ancient poetry, like Epic of Gilgamesh, the Odyssey, just a lot of that stuff. So I think that the setting of ancient history was a good bridge between like a setting where you could have a combat RPG and the type of poetry that I like, and magic and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't have a specific education in history or anything. It's just always been an interest. But I like the idea of the ancient Earth like that, because you can sort of use it to present a lot of fantastical things without being beholden to like sort of the I guess like medieval and like Enlightenment era modern ideas of like historical accuracy, or like a lot of the fantasy that we consume in games these days is built around the specific medieval fantasy period. And there's a lot of like structures that people expect to see with that stuff, and a lot of things that people expect to see work a certain way. So if you go back in time or you change the setting a bit, you can sort of free yourself from a lot of those expectations.
I really like that. I also liked how you worded that this game is an intersection between poetry and your love of likes.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. I have a series of following questions. And one of the first ones is, with all this content that you added, how did you manage to balance it? Or was that more of a add it along as we go and see what happens?
Is it balanced?
I don't know. Nobody knows. That's the beauty of it, right? Because there's so much stuff.
I definitely encountered... Well, this is sort of an anecdote I hear about the development of Guild Wars 1, if you've ever played that. But that's a game where you can combine 2 classes, and each class has access to all these skills that you can freely combine. And the issue they had in that game is they reached a point where they couldn't add anything else, because to add one thing, they'd have to anticipate how it would combine with every other thing they'd added before. So every new thing has an exponential increase in complexity. And that's sort of what's started happening with Path of Achra. Like there are stages of the game where it's more balanced. Like I think the demo version is actually a lot more balanced than the current one. I think when I released it, I had the impulse in the Steam description to put the term broken build sandbox. And I'm really happy I did that, because that sort of changed how I look at the game. I originally wanted it to be a really like balanced experience where you had to like, everything was like, you had to be really careful what you pick, you had to read everything, understand everything. And this is what, like, that was being inspired by Rift Wizard. And at a certain point, as I just kept adding stuff, I sort of felt like the feeling of there being so many things and so much variety was more important than the feeling of it being very tight, like, or tactical or balanced. So at this point, or in the latter stages of adding things, I was more concerned about, like, is this balanced enough? Does this create infinite loops? Does this lock the player out of playing? Does it, like, crash the game? That was more what I was looking for. In general, though, like, I did have, like, sort of intuitive sense of what would be too strong. I don't know. There's always going to be stuff in the game that's breaking it at this point. I kind of crossed that bridge a long time ago, and I can't really go back. I think I sort of like that. I sort of realized that's something you can lean into, is this idea that you have a game that's sort of janky that players can break completely. Just have it be that, like, not really worry about it being perfectly balanced. Just more like give players ways to just combine things and do things that you don't expect. And that sort of creates its own kind of fun.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest charm of the game by far. We've talked about the amount of content and the type of content, but could you walk me through your creative process? So back then, you woke up at 4 a.m., you just sat down and you knew what you wanted to add? Or did you do some research first?
I would sort of write down an idea in Notepad, and then I would look at that the next day and try to make something out of it. I would try to, like, when I was really, like, grinding them out, I would do, like, 1 or 2 new classes every day and then upload a Steam build. And that's something I did for, like, a month. Like, I was doing a daily update like that. And I was really proud of that because it was very exciting for people to, like, get a new thing every single day. It was sort of like an advent calendar. And the idea was that I was trying to fill the screen before I did the full release. That was, like, the most intense I ever was creating stuff for the game. Like, I think that was the most unhealthy way I was doing it too. Like, I was really burning myself out. It was a lot of fun at the same time. It's interesting because a game like this, I feel like a lot of the work that went into, like, building the game itself and how the levels generated and how you interact with it, that all had to happen before I had a game that people were playing. And once people were playing, 90% of my game design creativity went into creating new classes for people to use. And occasionally, like, I'd add a new feature or, like, a new level or that kind of thing. But it was mostly just creating new things that people could pick. And new enemies, I guess, that kind of thing. It would sort of start, like, sometimes I would do a bunch of pixel art, and then I would sort of think of mechanics for what they would do. Like, I would draw something, like, what class could this be? What cool thing could this do? I would start from the image first.
Oh my god, that's amazing. I love that. Could you tell me a little bit about how preparing for the early access and the full release was?
Yeah. So early access, what I did is I did an itch demo. What you can do, what's great about Godot is it can upload to do a browser playable version. So I had that on itch.io for a while, and that was really good for getting player feedback. I could sort of gauge what people were responding to. So I had a free version on itch for a while, and then I eventually put a demo on Steam. And that's kind of where I messed up, I think. I should have had a Steam demo from the start, because whether you like it or not, I don't know if it's, like, good, but Steam controls so much of the audience for games, and just having stuff on Steam is super important, it feels, for reaching people. But anyway, I did that, and then I just sort of, like, kept building out the demo that people were playing until it felt like there was a good amount of content, and then I just released an early access. Yeah, to prepare for that, I don't know, I wasn't, like, the best at marketing or sending keys out to streamers or anything. There are a couple big ones that I was aware of, like Retromation, Splattercat, and Nucrium. They all tended to cover a variety indie games and, like, new releases. And so those are the ones I sort of tried to cover me, and they did, which is really awesome. They probably gave me the initial burst. I have to shout out to Blind IRL. He's a streamer. He mostly does Dwarf Fortress, but he'll look for new games on itch.io. Like, some streamers will do this, and he found my game. He's the first person who ever made videos in that game, and he still does. And I think that was really, really essential for creating, like, an enthusiastic word-of-mouth small audience. And it feels like a lot of my spread has been from that kind of word-of-mouth thing. Because the idea is that somebody will play the game, and then they'll see me putting out lots of updates, and they'll get excited, and they'll tell their friends about it. That was my idea early on, anyway. And that's sort of how it worked through the demo, and then doing early access launch. And so I spent my whole early access year doing that, and eventually culminating in, like, the daily update thing, the sprint before the full release. Yeah, well, it felt like that was like something that other people wouldn't be able to do. Like if you're on a team, you're not going to be able to do that. I wanted to like sort of provide some kind of entertainment, I guess, that only a solo developer could, which is like, I guess, sort of manic episodes of lots of work and that kind of thing. I don't know. It's interesting trying to sell a game because it feels to me like it's like half of it is sort of how you portray yourself as a developer. Like people want to get on board with that as much as they want to play the game. Although the game is really important too.
Agreed, agreed. Let's make a little bit of a pause here, a detour, if you will. Where did the persona from Ulfsire come from?
Oh, that's just the name I used in Warcraft 3 for making maps. I think early on I thought that I would be able to like bring an audience over from my Warcraft 3 players, which I didn't. So that's why I used that name, but I didn't really have to, and I really wish I used something else because it's just like a stupid name I made when I was 13 years old. I don't know, I could have changed it, and I didn't. It was my bad. Now I'm stuck.
Stuck forever.
Yeah.
Stuck forever. Okay, little detour, we're back. What do you think was your biggest challenge faced, or can be multiple?
I think my biggest challenge is probably the emotional feeling of like the imposter syndrome, making a game, not having a big software background, trying to do things. Early on, I don't know if you've ever like tried to develop something, but like you'll go online. Like I went online, I was like looking for feedback. I was joining other game dev communities, and I don't know. Like I think you have to be careful who you get feedback from, honestly, because it's possible. It's really easy to get into a situation where like you're getting feedback from a bunch of people who haven't put anything out, and it can be kind of like sort of like a negative trap, or a lot of people sort of projecting their own insecurities onto whatever you're doing. And I think definitely my biggest challenge was insecurity and learning how to ignore it and to just do things and to not be paralyzed. I think what was helpful for me is like my history with poetry and stuff. It taught me to do creative work without expecting like reward or validation. I think it's good. I don't know. I think it's just like it's fighting that perfectionist impulse and that like feeling of dissatisfaction that what you're putting out is just like stupid and ugly and sort of messy. You have to like sort of learn to love the ugliness and the messiness of it, especially as like a solo developer, because that's sort of what makes you special in a way.
Absolutely agree. You have such a way with words. Oh my god. Okay. Tell me about your least favorite part of the game.
Least favorite part would be probably the summoning. I just don't like how that plays. I don't know how to make it more fun. Some people have fun with it, but for me, I don't know. That's my least favorite part of playing the game. Are you asking me my least favorite part of making it?
No. Your least favorite part of the game, like in general, of what you create.
Oh yeah. I think it's that. I think it's also like so. Like if like my first screenshots of it are like of the world map, but it's like a big grid and you can freely move around on it. It's sort of like an open world thing. I think my least favorite part is how linear it became. Like I really wanted to make a really immersive like RPG where you like had to like gather herbs and make unguents and whatever, really immersive stuff like that. And it became a very combat focused thing, which I think benefited it. I think that's what it wanted to be. I think like a lot of devs have this advice where you should just let the game sort of become what it wants to be at a certain point. You can't be too stubborn about it. But I'm always sort of grieving what I wished the game had been. I think like at every point where you make a decision about what a game is doing, you're abandoning like 5 other possibilities. And it's hard to sort of leave those possibilities behind. And I think that's what sort of I regret most about it, is all the things that it could have been that were sort of limited by my, lack of expertise or knowledge in terms of using Godot script or whatever, And it's still painful, like when I play the game, because I still hold on to all those things as things I yearn for that I used to motivate myself, but it makes it hard to be satisfied with whatever I'm playing. And then, so I think my favorite part of the game is, I think it does really succeed in a particular vibe. I like that it allowed me to sort of spew all of this poetry and dark fantasy stuff and all this world building into it. And I really like that it lets you play. It rewards you for being like a naked ape warrior type thing. Like that I feel that's not rewarded enough in games. That sort of archetype. So I'm very happy that I'm able to provide that to people and to myself.
You also provided me, a summoning lover, with my perfect build. I know you hate it, but I just love summons and just like leaving space bar pressed and everything fights itself.
I thought that the least I could do is at least make it so the summoning was like uncapped. I think like a lot of games, you have a summoner class, but it's like you can summon 3 things and it's very limited. So I'm glad that like it's a game where you can enter a level and fill every square with a summon unit instantly if you want. Because that at least is something you can't do in other places, very many other places. So
That's one of the most fun things at Path of Achra. How easy you can break it, right? Like with different things, and you're like, what the hell? All right. That was Path of Achra. And you've finally reached an end, or will you still be updating it?
I'm it's open to more updates. It's sort of again just like emotionally on a whim for me, and that's what that's what the players love. They love that it's unpredictable because I'm not a professional person, and if I feel like it, if I have a strong feeling, I'll add something. But I'm definitely not focused on it in the way that I was like 6 months ago. I'm very focused on the new game. I think it's really important for developers to have multiple games out, and I want to sort of expand the universe. So a lot of my thought is going towards that.
That's what I saw. Could you tell me a little bit of Lands of Achra? I know that it's in the same universe as you said already, which I find really cool. How do the games vary, and how are you hoping to expand on it?
Yeah, I'm trying again at that 4X project I abandoned before I made Path of Achra. So maybe it's sort of a cursed endeavor. I'm using all the stuff I learned, and it's basically going to be a lot like Conquest of Elysium if anyone's played that. I'm going to do lots of really fun world generation, a lot of like big armies auto battling each other. So I guess it sort of embodies what being a summoner in Path of Achra is like. But it lets you play as all like the enemy factions, like the Ratmen, that kind of thing. And I like the idea, like Path of Achra is all about combining elements to create like a customized hero. So like you'd be like a warrior flame knight of Hadad. And I'm interested in applying that concept to like a nation or a faction. So like being like a Ratman fire cult or something, combining multiple things to create these cool customized sort of characters. Yeah. The long-term goal with Lands of Achra is I'm developing that open world map that I can then make a Path of Achra 2 take place in. So it's not a linear game. It gets to be the big open world RPG that I wanted to make. So I'm sort of using this project as a way to learn more about procedural generation and big world generation and like moving entities around and saving stuff and how to manage data without lowering frame rate too much, that kind of thing. So that's the general plan.
Oh, nice. That already sounds like some advanced stuff. I'm looking forward to it. One question that I want to ask you, and I'm just super interested in, how has the success of Path of Achra changed your life?
Oh, it's just been like, I think I tend to like emphasize negatives and seem kind of miserable, but like honestly, like it's unbearably exciting having something I made that I'm in charge of be in front of so many people and be enjoyed by so many people. Like that it's hard to contain the excitement that comes from that. And it's something I've always I've always dreamed of feeling that, and now I get to feel it, and it feels very lucky. So it's changed my life, and it's just made my life better in every way, pretty much. I'm starting to have back problems from doing computer stuff too much, but aside from that, it's just a great thing. It's been a really great thing. I don't want to, because I worry about sounding too negative, because I try to I'm not trying to hype things up too much, but obviously having such a wide reach, that recent Seth video, it's just been amazing for me. Like this is the best thing I could have hoped for.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. I mean, the highs are highs and the lows are lows, right? That's game development.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it could all. It's just such an unstable thing. It's not like it's just so unpredictable and unstable, and I don't know. I don't know what the right thing to do is, except to just keep making stuff and try to articulate your interest to everyone else.
You gotta do what works for you, right? And if this works for you, it means it's proven to work, then that's what you gotta keep doing. All right. I have one last question. Do you have any advice for those people who are listening out there?
Yeah, I would say don't be insecure about what you're making. Just make stuff. If it feels frustrating, you could just start a new project. The most important thing you can do is publish something. Just getting to that point. I would say that's like, I know it's easy to say, just don't be anxious, don't be insecure. I say it to myself, and it never works. But like, all you have to do is publish something, and it might not work out. It's totally luck based. There are like 3 other roguelikes published at the same time as mine that I thought were better than Path of Achra, but they didn't get any attention, and it was just totally luck. And it's, you never know who's going to be looking at it. The best thing you can do is just like try to communicate your passion constantly to everyone else. The most important thing you can have is attention. I'm not advocating for like just pursuing attention for attention's sake. I think it's more like you need to get attention, but once you have the attention, you need to have something that people can really grab onto, and that's going to be just making stuff that you think is interesting, that you're passionate about, or that seems to be what works in my experience.
Words of wisdom. So that's a good note to end on. Hunter, thank you so much for your time and having you here today, and thank you to everyone who stopped to listen. Before we say goodbye, please plug your stuff.
Yeah, look up Lands of Achra, wishlist it, check out Path of Achra. If you can't afford it, just send me a message. I like to give out copies. I just been working on a Path of Achra website, pathofachra.com, which I've been using to sort of deposit a lot of longer pieces of writing around the game's universe, if you're interested in that stuff. That sort of like Vanished Age, dark fantasy thing. And if you want to interact with me, I'm on the social media. I'm on Discord. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, Reddit. I love interacting with people. Say hi if you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hunter. This was Godot Unscripted. Cue free. Have you listened to the podcast before? Or do you just accept on a whim?
I just checked it out after you messaged me. It's really cool. I like that you are highlighting Godot stuff. I think that's important. I have like a game dev server for Maine, like for local people in the area. And I was trying to make a post, and you could like tag it with Flare. And they only had options for Unity or Unreal. They didn't have a Godot option. So it's important that you're spreading the word on this stuff. Because I think Godot is really good. It's really anything that supports like small independent creators like that is just the best thing. Like I really dislike Unity and Unreal. I dislike the professional tools. I dislike all the gatekeeping with that stuff. So I appreciate that you are helping to like show that people can actually make games in Godot.
Of course, everyone, right? That's the point of this podcast. Like every time a developer talks, it's just so humanizing, right? I mean, everybody knows we're all humans, right? We all eat, shit, sleep, but just hearing somebody express that the anxieties, their path.
Yeah, you don't go from like becoming an anxious struggler to suddenly becoming an unreachable genius just because a game sold a couple copies on Steam. Like you're the same person, and it's important for people to know that, because I mean, trying to enter into it, and you look at people with these huge games and you feel like, how do you ever become that? Yeah, it's good to humanize it.